Welcome to the deep dive. So, tell me if this sounds familiar to you. It's Friday afternoon, right?
Right.
You're wrapping up work and you have these grand sweeping plans for the weekend. You're going to hit the gym, maybe like finally practice that acoustic guitar that's been gathering dust in the corner of your bedroom.
Oh, yeah, we all have that one hobby we swear we'll get to.
Exactly.
Mhm.
You tell yourself you're going to read a couple chapters of some dense nonfiction book and just generally get your life together. But then you blink.
And it's suddenly Sunday night.
Yes. You're sitting in the dark, the weekend has completely vanished into thin air, and you're just staring at the ceiling wondering why absolutely none of those personal goals or hobbies actually happened.
It's such a remarkably universal experience. I mean, we all know that sudden sinking realization.
It's the worst.
Right. Your so-called free time simply evaporated, leaving you with nothing to show for it, but like a vague sense of existential regret and a sore thumb from endlessly scrolling through social media.
And that profound feeling of, well, where did the time go? That is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're looking at a highly debated post from the Retrieving Thoughts blog.
Yeah, and the core premise of this author's approach to time management, well, it is definitely going to ruffle some feathers.
Oh, it ruffled mine. Big time. Let's get into the backstory, though, because it sets the stage perfectly. So, the author of this post is at a recent company offsite, chatting with some new colleagues, and the conversation naturally drifts to personal projects.
As it usually does at those things.
Right, and someone asked the million-dollar question, like, how do you find the time to do all of this? And the author reveals this deeply controversial secret. For the last 7 months, they haven't just been scheduling work meetings.
Or, dentist appointments.
No. They have been color-coding and scheduling absolutely everything in their calendar. And I mean every single waking moment.
Down to the most granular details of their private personal life.
All of it. Mapped out and aligned to their annual goals. We're talking gym sessions, language study blocks, specific times for reading. But here is the part that genuinely makes my skin crawl.
Here it comes.
They are scheduling time for unwinding.
Yeah.
Like they are literally putting calendar blocks on their schedule for playing a video game, watching a movie, or doing a meditation session. And a friend of the author called this a formal approach to spare time.
Oh, wow.
I know. I have a visceral distaste for that phrase.
That phrase definitely strikes a nerve, right? I mean, it sounds entirely counterintuitive to the very concept of leisure.
Because it sounds absolutely psychotic.
Yeah.
Putting a calendar block on unwinding completely murders the spontaneity of human life.
Do you think so?
Yes. Imagine looking at a screen and thinking, it is 7:20 p.m. on a Tuesday. I must now commence relaxation protocols. It sounds like a straitjacket.
Right.
It sounds like chaos pretending to be order. You can't put joy in a spreadsheet.
Well, it's funny you say that because the author actually anticipated this exact reaction.
Of course they did.
They did, and they provide a striking visual in the source material to conceptualize that resistance. There's this image showing two pictures side by side. So on the left side, under the label order, there is a beautiful, natural, perfectly intact pine branch.
Right. Natural, organic, spontaneous, just existing as a pine branch should.
Exactly. But then, on the right side, under the label chaos, that exact same pine branch has been completely stripped bare. Every single needle and tiny twig has been painstakingly pulled off and meticulously sorted by size into a rigid bar chart.
That perfectly illustrates my point. Stripping the natural joy out of your weekend and sorting it into a color-coded bar chart on Google Calendar is ruining the branch. You've, destroyed the weekend just to measure it.
See, but the paradox the author's pointing out is that to the outside observer, scheduling your video game time looks exactly like that stripped, sterile bar chart.
Because it is.
It looks obsessive, sure. But a coworker of the author looked at this incredibly rigid system and summarized it with a very specific, famous phrase. They said, "Discipline is freedom."
Oh, please. I am rolling my eyes so hard right now.
I knew you would.
I mean, discipline is freedom. Sounds like one of those incredibly cheesy motivational posters you see framed next to a stock photo of a sunrise in a corporate break room.
Right, right.
It's right up there with those cringe quotes like, it does not matter how many days are in your life. It only matters how much life is in your days. It's empty corporate speak.
Well, okay, the author initially had the exact same reaction. Hearing freedom from discipline sounds like claiming silence comes from a thunderstorm. It feels like a total contradiction.
Exactly.
But after living this way for 7 months, the author had a profound realization about human behavior. If you do not actively guard your hours like a fortress, they don't remain spontaneous and joyful. They simply vanish.
Well, yeah, they vanish because we gravitate toward the path of least resistance.
We do. I mean, a quick scroll on your phone while waiting for the kettle to boil turns into 30 minutes. Watching a few reels on the couch turns into an entire evening gone.
That is painfully true.
Right. So that beautiful natural pine branch you want your weekend to be doesn't stay intact. It just rots on the ground. The argument here is that discipline isn't the straitjacket that strips the branch. Discipline is a filter.
A filter. Okay. I'm listening, but I am remaining skeptical.
Fair enough. Think of it as the art of saying an intentional yes to the things that actually matter to you, which, inherently requires saying no to the endless algorithmic distractions of the modern world.
Right.
By choosing to dictate their own schedule, the author gave themselves the power to actually execute the hobbies they cared about. Without the calendar block, the guitar never gets played, the video game never gets enjoyed guilt-free because it's always tainted by the anxiety of what they, quote-unquote, should be doing.
Okay, I see the underlying logic.
Yes.
I understand the concept of building a wall around your time so it doesn't get eaten by the algorithm.
Yeah.
But I am still pushing back hard on the sheer exhaustion of executing this lifestyle. Like, in the article, there is literally an image of Batman sitting there meditating, surrounded by this chaotic, explosive collage of comic book action.
Yeah, that image is wild.
I look at that and think, I am not Batman.
Yeah.
I am a tired person after a 9-hour workday. I can't just forcefully meditate through the chaos of my life through sheer grit. My willpower drains.
Yeah, you're actually bringing up a critical physiological point there. And the scientific consensus, which the source explores, is that willpower is absolutely not an infinite well you can just tap into whenever you feel like it.
Thank you.
Willpower is a highly limited resource. It's actively depleted by every single effortful decision you make throughout the day, from, choosing what to eat for breakfast to holding your tongue in a frustrating meeting.
Exactly. Taking on big goals requires massive sustained effort. If my goal is, I want to read 12 dense nonfiction books this year, or I want to learn conversational French, I cannot just magically manifest the cognitive energy to do that at 8 p.m. just because I drew a blue box on my calendar.
Right.
The effort is high, and the results are incredibly slow.
Which is why the source compares willpower to a biological muscle. It requires renewal. It needs adequate sleep, proper nutrition, and periods of complete cognitive rest. You can't rely on brute force to get through your color-coded calendar. It will fail.
So what's the point then?
Well, this brings up the central dilemma the author poses. If we know these goals will make us happier in the long run, why is it so incredibly difficult to just do the things we know are good for us?
Because sinking into the couch and turning on a streaming service requires 0 calories and 0 cognitive load.
Exactly. The author frames this struggle with a quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most."
What you want now versus what you want most?
Yeah.
Man, that is the core conflict.
It really is. At a neurological level, discipline is simply the skill of self-regulation. It's the ability to align your immediate impulses with your long-term desires. The science backing this up is fascinating. Consider Walter Mischel's famous marshmallow test from the late 1960s.
Oh yeah, the one where researchers put a marshmallow in front of a preschooler and say, if you sit here for 15 minutes and don't eat this, I will give you a second marshmallow.
That's the one.
And they leave the room and film the kids just agonizing over it.
Yeah, the hidden camera footage is iconic for a reason. But the crucial insight isn't just that some kids succeeded and some failed. The longitudinal data showed that decades later, the children who successfully delayed gratification exhibited significantly higher academic achievement.
Wow.
Better stress management, healthier lifestyles. However, the most important takeaway from that study is how the successful kids managed to wait.
Because they didn't just stare at the marshmallow and flex their willpower muscle.
Right. Exactly. They employed strategies. The successful children actively covered their eyes. They turned their chairs around so they couldn't see the treat. They sang songs to distract themselves. I didn't rely on raw, innate grit. They engineered a system to lower the temptation. Self-control is a proven predictor of later success, but it's fundamentally about strategy, not just suffering.
Okay, but how does that translate to staring at a calendar block that tells me to study French? Because staring at that task feels like staring at a plate of boiled vegetables when my brain is screaming for a donut. I still have to do the work.
The author addresses this specific friction with a brilliant analogy in the source. They call it the donut versus the gym, and it's all about how we process dopamine.
Okay, lay out the analogy for me.
So we need to understand that dopamine is not just a happy chemical. It is a powerful neuromodulator that drives motivation, craving, and anticipation.
Right.
You get a surge of dopamine from hitting the gym, and you get a surge of dopamine from eating a donut. You pay a cost for both of them, too, but the payment structures are entirely flipped.
Flipped how? What do you mean?
Well, for the gym, you pay the cost up front. No pain, no gain, right? You exert intense physical effort, you sweat, your muscles tear. It's uncomfortable in the moment.
Very uncomfortable.
But the dopamine reward, the endorphin rush, the increased strength, the long-term health benefits that arrives on the back end and lasts for a very long time.
Okay, and the donut is the inverse.
Exactly. With the donut, you get the dopamine hit immediately, instant gratification on the front end, but you pay the cost on the back end. The author specifically notes the aftermath of bad skin, lethargy, and weight gain.
Yeah.
You deal with the negative consequences long after the momentary pleasure has faded. It's a stark biological choice between short-term pleasure and long-term fulfillment.
So our brains are essentially biologically hardwired by millions of years of evolution to seek the immediate calories and the instant dopamine hit of the donut or, the social media scroll.
Yeah.
We are just constantly fighting our own evolutionary programming.
We really are. And the color-coded checkboxes on the calendar aren't meant to be a rigid prison. They're actually a psychological hack to bypass that programming.
Wait, you're saying the calendar itself is the hack?
Yes. The author designed their daily schedule so that ticking off those smaller tasks serves as momentary satisfaction checkpoints. You're artificially creating upfront dopamine hits to sustain a long-term goal.
Oh. So by checking the box that says, studied French for 20 minutes, I get a tiny microdose of dopamine right now.
Exactly.
Which satisfies my primate brain's need for instant gratification, but it's attached to the long-term goal.
By creating that immediate reward mechanism, you keep the motivation flowing. Structured self-regulation actually preserves your cognitive energy.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. When your decisions are pre-made on a calendar, you don't have to spend your limited willpower agonizing over what to do at 7 p.m. You just execute the plan, which saves your mental bandwidth for the actual creative work.
Okay, I understand the neurochemistry now. The theory is sound. But implementing this in the real world still sounds incredibly daunting. Like if I'm staring down a calendar full of color-coded obligations after a long day, I am still going to feel overwhelmed.
Sure.
How do we actually apply this without turning our lives into a miserable second job?
Well, the author provides a specific blueprint for that. Rather than just offering abstract philosophy, the source details a framework of behavioral hacks designed to remove the friction of getting started.
Let's walk through these, because if I'm going to become the CEO of my own weekend, I need to know how to not burn out by Tuesday. So the author suggests starting by defining the why.
Yes, and this cannot be a generic aspiration. It has to be an emotional anchor.
Right, so you can't just put practice guitar on the calendar because playing an instrument makes you a well-rounded person.
No, not at all.
Your tired brain at 8 p.m. does not care about being well-rounded. The author insists on aggressive specificity. Your why needs to be, I am practicing this specific chord progression because I am tired of being the person who never finishes an original track.
Exactly. Grounding the task in a deeply personal, tangible desire gives you leverage over your own laziness.
Okay.
Once you have that emotional anchor, the next step is addressing the sheer exhaustion of starting. And the author's solution here is to start micro.
Now, I have to challenge this one. The author says if a 60-minute study block feels impossible, commit to 5 minutes. That feels like a fake productivity hack. I mean, I am not going to learn a language or get in shape by doing anything for 5 minutes a day.
It sounds inadequate on paper, I'll give you that, but it is deeply rooted in the psychology of friction. The hardest part of any task is simply the transition from doing nothing to doing something. It's the activation energy.
So the 5 minutes is just a trick to get me off the couch.
Pretty much. By committing to only 5 minutes, you lower the barrier to entry so drastically that your brain cannot reasonably formulate an excuse not to do it.
Okay, true.
Once you actually start the task, the friction dissolves. You build momentum. The psychological reality is that once you play guitar for 5 minutes, the brain's innate desire for task completion kicks in, and you'll almost always end up playing for 20 or 30 minutes. You're manipulating your own activation energy.
Okay, that makes sense. Lower the hurdles so you don't trip over it. But what happens when the system breaks? Because life is chaotic. What if I miss a day? What if I just ignore the calendar block entirely?
Well, the author's framework explicitly accounts for human failure. The principle here is progress over perfection.
Yeah, the source states clearly that guilt is not a productivity tool.
It's a fantastic reminder, right? Perfectionism is often just procrastination in a tailored suit. If you miss a scheduled block, the worst thing you can do is spiral into a shame vortex and abandon the entire system just because the streak is broken.
You don't burn down the house just because you left a dish in the sink.
Exactly.
You look at why you missed the block, tweak the system, and move on. The goal isn't a flawless calendar. The goal is a more fulfilling life.
Which brings us to the problem of our future selves. We know that tonight at 8 p.m., we are going to be tired, and we are going to crave the metaphorical donut. The strategy here is pre-commitment.
Making the right decision right now while my willpower is high, so my weaker future self can't screw it up later.
Precisely. You build guardrails for your inevitable moments of weakness. You pack your gym bag the night before and physically block your front door with it. You set a focus timer on your phone that automatically locks you out of social media apps at a specific time.
You are entirely removing the decision-making process from the moment of temptation.
Huh.
I don't have to decide to go to the gym. Past me already made the decision and put my shoes in my way.
Yes.
And I guess this ties into the next concept, environment engineering. We have to design our physical surroundings so the desired action is the path of least resistance.
Exactly. You manipulate the physical world to support your cognitive goals.
If you want to eat healthier, do not keep junk food in the house. If you want to write a novel, declutter your desk so you don't have to spend 20 minutes moving coffee mugs before you can open your laptop.
So true.
But the most interesting part of this environment engineering is a neurological trick the source brings up called habit stacking.
Oh, habit stacking is arguably the most powerful tool in this entire framework. It relies on the way our brains physically construct neural pathways.
How does that work neurologically? I mean, what's actually happening?
Think of a deeply ingrained habit like brewing coffee every morning or brushing your teeth as a thick, paved superhighway in your brain. The synaptic connections are incredibly strong. It requires zero effort to execute.
Okay, I'm with you.
But trying to build a brand new habit, like meditating for 10 minutes, is like trying to hack a path through a dense jungle with a machete. It's exhausting.
So habit stacking is essentially piggybacking the new behavior onto the existing superhighway.
Exactly. You attach the new, fragile habit directly to the old, robust habit.
Yep.
You tell yourself, while the coffee is brewing, which is an action I do automatically every single day without fail, I will do 5 minutes of my language app.
Ah, so you're using the automatic trigger of the coffee maker to initiate the new behavior. You don't need willpower because the cue is already built into your environment.
Spot on. You magnify small wins into lasting behavioral change because you aren't fighting to create a new trigger from scratch.
All right, so I have my why, I am starting microbe or I'm pre-committing, and I'm stacking my habits. The one lingering concern I have is rigidity. Like, how does this color-coded calendar not eventually just become that stripped dead pine branch we talked about at the beginning?
Well, the author prevents that rigidity through a critical maintenance step, and that's the weekly review. You have to treat your Sunday afternoon like a high-level strategy meeting with your future self.
So it's an active auditing process.
Yeah. You sit down and look at the past week's calendar. You ask yourself brutal questions like, what actually worked? What failed miserably? Did scheduling guitar practice at 9 p.m. result in me just staring blankly at the wall?
All right.
And most importantly, you ask if your daily routines still align with your larger goals.
You reflect and you adjust the schedule. You are constantly tailoring the suit to fit the reality of your current life, rather than forcing your life to fit a rigid spreadsheet.
Yes. As the author beautifully articulates, discipline, when applied correctly, is not a punishment, it's a permission.
Wow.
It gives you the permission to intentionally build the life you actually want to live, rather than just passively reacting to whatever demands and algorithmic distractions happen to be shoved in front of you on any given day.
You know, this has been a massive perspective shift. We started out with me arguing that scheduling a video game was a crime against the human spirit. And now, honestly, I am genuinely considering auditing my Google Calendar.
It's pretty compelling stuff.
It really is. So let's distill this deep dive into some key actionable takeaways for everyone listening. Takeaway number 1, we need to fundamentally redefine our concept of freedom. Real freedom is not the total absence of rules. An absence of rules just leads to chaos, algorithm spirals, and lost weekends. Real freedom is having the agency to choose the rules that shape your world. Discipline isn't a trap. It is the filter that protects your time.
Perfectly said. And takeaway number 2. Understand that your willpower is a biological muscle and it depletes throughout the day. Do not rely on sheer grit to achieve long-term goals. Hack your own neurochemistry. Prioritize long-term fulfillment over instant gratification by creating systems like checking off a calendar block that give your brain those immediate dopamine hits for doing the difficult, meaningful work.
Right. And takeaway number 3. Stop fighting your own laziness and start outsmarting it. Make the hard choices easy by engineering your environment. Lower the friction by starting with just 5 minutes. Lock out your future self through pre-commitment, and map new habits onto existing neural pathways through habit stacking.
Yeah, that's the blueprint right there.
Definitely. And if you want to read the full breakdown, see the donut versus gem analogy, and look at those striking images of the pine branch for yourself, the link to the full Retrieving Thoughts article is right there in the description. I highly recommend checking it out.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. If you were to audit your last 48 hours with complete, unflinching honesty, how much of your free time was actually actively chosen by you, and how much was simply stolen by the path of least resistance?
Oof, that is a deeply uncomfortable question that will definitely keep you up at night.
Yeah, it will.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning the chaos, guard your time like a fortress, and we will catch you on the next one.